I'm going to turn my video off and let everyone in and everything, but awesome.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Great to see everybody. Sorry, we had some technical glitches. Wow, people got the message that it's starting early today. So glad to see everybody. Hi, Lauren, Liliana, Debbie in Florida, I think, Asher Chaim, Roberta, Harley, Beth, Barbara. Great to see you. I miss our adult B Mitzvah group. Hi, Andrea and Daniel. Great to see you in one little box. Bob. Boxes, Keith. Hi, Keith. Oh, you're in a different box than Barbara. You're flanking Andrea and Daniel for me. Not that that's relevant. Hi, Alan and Neva. Neva, I realized I was calling you Ziva for a while. I'm sorry about that. Now I'll call you Neva because I think that's the right name, correct? You're in the dark, so I can't really see if you're, yes, okay. Sorry for calling you Ziva. Neva is much better. Hi, Margot. Hi, David. Good morning. I know I owe you an email. Thank you for reminding me. Hi, Rachamana. What a beautiful name. Hi. All right. We're gonna get started. Raise your hand quickly in some way or another if you'd like to make the blessing over Torah study this morning. Beth, here we go. Okay. Lourdes, we'll get you next time. We got Beth this time. Sorry, things are happening back there. Okay, things are happening backstage. Okay, Beth. I think you should be able to unmute yourself. Is that right, Anna?
Now I can unmute myself. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen, amen. Blessed are you, source of all revelation, who has given us the opportunity this morning to soak in your Torah and sacred wisdom. So for those who are just popping in, thank you for coming earlier this week. We had some technical difficulties, so we're starting a few minutes late, but hopefully we'll get to some juicy material. And Anna, people should be able to unmute themselves when I call on them. So in other words, leave them with that ability to unmute. And if it gets out of hand, we'll just mute everybody. Okay, I'm going to, thank you, Anna. I'm going to share my screen. Lourdes, did you want to say something, or is your hand up about the Torah blessing?
No, it was about the Torah blessing, Rabbi.
Okay, okay, we'll get you another time. Okay, so we're going back to Jacob, and this time with Rachel and Leah. Last time we saw Jacob cheated his brother out of a blessing and deceived his father at his mother's behest. Really complicated stuff. And we explored the idea of midah keneged midah, measure for measure, where it's kind of the Jewish version of karma. And we're going to go back into that theme with a different scene with Jacob in his, I don't know what to say, what word to use, what adjective, troubled scene regarding his marriage of Rachel and Leah. Troubled, disturbed, difficult, painful, anguished. We'll figure out the adjectives as we go along. Asher Chaim.
Two technical requests. If it's possible to drop a PDF version directly into the chat. And number two, can we pass notes during class? Could the chat be left open for us?
I'll tell you, I'm sorry, we cannot have direct chats because then people chat me directly and I can't concentrate. I'm really sorry. I apologize. And people can't help it even if I say no. So I just can't do it. Okay. great to have a couple of people in person here. Wow. The open book is now officially hybrid. Not really. Okay, we're going into the source sheet. And Anna, are you able to drop a PDF into the chat? Does that work for you? I'm
Yes,
guessing.
yes, I can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to Anna for moderating and managing so many technical difficulties this morning. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, can people see this? Just nod your head. Thank you, Beth. Nodding your head. So this morning, and I had a really lovely chavruta this morning with Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld. I don't think she can make it this morning, unfortunately, but I'm going to try to channel her throughout. And we talked, I originally called it karmic consequences. And after our study, and for some points she raised, which I will share later, I called it karmic consequences and opportunities, or midah keneged midah, measure for measure, revisited, because we talked about this last week. Jacob, Rachel, and Leah in Parshat Vayetze. And again, I feel like this sentence from Jung is sort of looming over things. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So we'll consider that throughout. I'm sorry I don't have floor sheets for the people who are here next time. But we are now going to start in Genesis 29, the first verse. Everyone have a Torah? Excellent. Okay. Let me see if I can move the boxes. I know I will get tired of reading after a while and ask someone to read, but for now I will start. So this is really the context or the background, but of Jacob coming into the scene where he meets Rachel, but already we have some echoes from his earlier life, which we will look at. And this scene is so much about, Jacob and who he is and his great, great love for Rachel. So we start off, the scene before this, which is also in our Parsha, was him leaving home and coming to a scene where he goes to sleep on a rock and has a dream about angels. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with that. And you'll see rocks, will loom large in the scene as well. And he wakes up and he says, God was here and I did not know it. So he comes from there. And it's interesting, Rashi says about the first verse, Jacob lifted his feet and came to the land of the Easterners. So something about that dream and his sort of conversation / bargain with God, gave him strength and energy. And he's like, eager to go back to the hometown of his mother, right? Which is, I think it's called by different names throughout the Parsha and the last Parsha, Haran, Nahor, but whatever it is, it's the place where Abraham and his family got to, Haran, and then that's where Abraham made his lonely journey to the promised land. That's the place from which he left. So we're going back, I think, in order to go forwards. Okay. So verse 2. Vaya'ar v'hinei be'er basadeh. So, and he saw, and before his eyes was a well. Now, as soon as students of the Torah or biblical literature hear well, there should be a little bell going off saying, courtship, 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 right? Because that happens again and again. V'hinei sham shlosha edrei tzon rabsim aleha ki min habe'er hahi yashku ha'adarim v'ha'even dola al pi habe'er. So 3 flocks of sheep were laying there besides it. For the flocks were watered from that well. So we've got water, and here comes the rock. The stone on the mouth of the well was large. Okay, so there's that water that represents courtship and perhaps fertility, and then we got what's blocking it, right? The big rock on the mouth of the well was sort of just in the way of the water. The ne'efsush. Okay, so here's the scene, right? V'ne'efsu shama kol ha'adarim, and all the flocks would be gathered there, or when all the flocks were gathered there, v'galalu et ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er, they would roll the stone from off the well, v'hishku hatzon, and give the sheep to drink. the Heshivu et ha'even al pi ha'be'er limkoma. And then they would put the rock back in its place. So the implication here is they don't move the stone until everyone's there. Why? Likely because, oh my God. Sorry, Anne, a little troubleshooting technologically. Celia's saying I'm in Zoom 2, but I'm pretty sure I'm Zoom 5. Could you communicate with Celia about this?
Yes, ma'am. Well,
Thank you so much. Let me know if there's something I should do. Okay. Vayomer lahem Yaakov achai me'ayin atem. Vayomru mecharan anachnu. So Yaakov says to them, let me just see what's going on with this. My friends or my brothers, where are you coming from? And they said, we are from Haran. And Jacob said to them, Vayomer lahem hayadatem et Lavan ben Nachor. And he said to them, do you know Lavan, the son of Nachor? Vayomer yadanu, we know him. Vayomer lahem hashalom lo. And he said to them, are they well? Is he well? Vayomer shalom. And they said to him, he is well. He is, he's whole, at peace. V'hinei Rachel bito ba'im hatzon. And here comes Rachel with the sheep. Here comes Rachel, his daughter, with the sheep. Vayomer hein. Sorry, I just see something. Okay. And he said to them, Od hayom gadol lo et he'asef hamikzeh hashku hatzon u'lechu ru'u. He said, is it still broad daylight, too early to round up the animals, water the flock, and take them to pasture? Vayamru lo nuchal, we can't. Ad asher yesfu kol ha'adarim, until all the flocks come. The galalu et ha'even mi'al pi ha'be'er v'hishkinu hatzon. And then we will roll the stone off the well and water the sheep. Okay, 9. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's flock, for she was a shepherdess. Odena midaber imam v'Rachel ba'a im hatzon asher la'aviha ki ro'ahi, because she was a shepherdess. Vayhi kasher ra'a Yaakov et Rachel bat Lavan achi imo ve'et son Lavan achi imo. So when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, the brother of his sister, and the sheep of Lavan, the brother of his sister, of his mother, the brother of his mother, sorry about that. Vayigash Yaakov, and Yaakov came close. Vayagel et ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er, vayashk et son Lavan achi imo. And Jacob approached, and he rolled the stone from upon the well, and he watered the sheep, so to speak, or he gave the sheep to drink. The sheep of Lavan, again and again, we're told, the brother of his mother. So it seems like we're told several times that one could not roll the stone off the well until everybody came, but he went and did it simultaneously, a display of like male power and strength. Once he saw Rachel and like the love came up, in his heart and in his body. Now, 11. Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel, vayisa et kolo vayefch. And he kissed Rachel. But it's interesting, there's at least a sound play going on between kissing and watering, vayashk and vayishak. And then here's a beautiful or a powerful echo of the voice of Esav in Vayisa et kolo vayefch, that he raised his voice and wept. So here it says, what we looked at last week in Genesis 27, that when Esav said to his father, have you but one blessing, father, bless me too, right? Habracha achati lecha avi, that heartbreaking line, it's written, Vayisa Esav kolo vayefch. And Esav raised his voice and wept. So what's going on here that Jacob would cry in the scene? Was it so emotional for him, his love for Rachel upon first sight? And or in addition, possibly, he's carrying with him throughout his life his brother's pain. V'yigad Yaakov l'Rachel. V'yiged Yaakov l'Rachel ki achi avihahu v'chi ben Rivkahu v'taratz v'taged la'aviha. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, and he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. Okay, I'm going to do one more longest piece to get like the meat of the, what's going on here sort of under our belts, and then we can have a conversation about it. Okay, so a couple verses later, we have the courtship / marriage scene. And it's, like I said before, disturbing to say the least, but let's see what happens and what it might mean. Okay, so Ululavan shtei vanot. So we already met Rachel, but the narrator's now acting like we haven't met Rachel, but, sort of going backwards and sort of, setting the stage and telling the story. Like once upon a time, Lavan had 2 daughters, and the one, Shem Hagdolah Leah, and the name of the older one was Leah, Shem Hagtana, Rachel, Rachel, and the name of the older one was Rachel. The Einei Leah Rakot, Rachel Haita Yifat Toar, V'Yifat Mar'eh. So already in the first verse, there's a polarity being set up between the older one and the younger one. Then in verse 17, it says that Leah's eyes were weak or soft. Very strange polarities being set up here. And in contrast, Rachel, is beautiful of shape and beautiful to look at. So what kind of strange contrast is that? Jay, I'm just going to get to the end of this passage and then I'll take your, okay. V'yehav Yaakov et Rachel, and Jacob loved Rachel. Vayomer evdecha sheva shanim b'Rachel bitcha hatana. So his love for her prompts him to talk to her father and saying, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your daughter, the younger one, as if the father doesn't know which one Rachel is, right? So the reader's, learning again and again that this is the younger one. Vayomer Lavan, tov titi ota lach, metiti ota leish acher, sheva imadi. So Lavan says in a kind of non-committal way, better than I give her to you than I should give her to an outsider. Stay with me. So he doesn't say yes, he doesn't say no. He just said, no, okay, you should marry her instead of someone else. It's just kind of vague. Vayavod Yaakov berachel sheva shanim, v'hiyu be'einav ki yamim achadim ba'ahavato ota. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. And it's interesting that Yamim Achadim, the few days, echoes what Rebecca told him when he was about to leave the house, which is like, go stay with my brother a little bit in, our hometown because your brother wants to kill you. And she says specifically Yamim Achadim, a few days. Vayomer Yaakov Elavan. Hava etishti, ki mal'u yamai va'avoa eleha. So, and Jacob says to Lavan, give me a wife, because I fulfilled my days and I want to come into her. Very crass, very coarse, right? V'yasof Lavan et kol anshe makom v'yas mishteh. So Lavan gathered all the people of the place, maybe the same guys that were at the well, and threw a party. So in the nighttime, what does Lavan do? He takes Leah, his daughter, and he brings her to him, to Jacob, and he comes into her, and he sleeps with her. So instead of Rachel, he gets Leah. Vayiten Lavan la et zilpa shivchato, Leah bito shivcha. And Lavan gives her Zilpah as a handmaiden, as a slave, to tell you the truth, to serve as a handmaiden. Vayhi baboker. Now we're in 25. Vayhi baboker. Dehine hi Leah. So Jacob wakes up and says, "Oh my God, it's Leah. What is going on here?" And says, I know it's a huge question. Why didn't he know? So we could talk about that. Vayomer el Lavan, and he says to Lavan, "Ma zot asita li? Hello, berachel avadati amach v'lama rimitani." And he says to Lavan, what is this you did to me? Isn't it Rachel that I worked for you? And why did you cheat me? Vayomer Lavan, lo ya'aseh chen bimkomenu latet ha'seira lifnei ha'bechira. So Lavan says to him, we don't do that. We don't do it like that in our place, to give the younger before the older, which is basically, it's almost as if Lavan knows what Jacob does. We don't behave that way in this place, like switching things up, like regarding younger and elder. Okay, so we're going to go down a little bit. We'll finish the rest of this a little bit later. And here's the echo, first of all, in Genesis 27 of Isaac's eyes being too dim to see, or Isaac's blindness, which, connects to Leah's eyes being soft or weak. And here, Yitzchak says to Esav in Genesis 27, in last week's Parsha, your brother came with guile and took away your blessing. Vayomer ba achicha b'mirmah v'yikach berchatecha, which is the same verb used here for what Yaakov calls Lavan out on. Okay, so now I want to see two pieces of commentary, and then we will open things up. Okay, Leah's eyes were weak. I'm going to not read the Hebrew just in the interest of time, but you have it right in front of you. Why were they weak? They were weak from crying. It was said that this is how it would work. The older one for the elder and the younger one for the younger. In other words, the older sister would marry the elder brother, and the younger sister would marry the younger brother. And she didn't want to marry Esav, basically. And she would cry and say, may it be your will, God, that it will not be my destiny to marry this wicked person. Rabbi Huna said her prayer was hard or strong. No, it says kashet, that it nullified the decree, and even more, that she went before her sister. So not only did it nullify the decree that she was supposed to marry Esav, but her prayer was so powerful to like sort of avert this destiny that she married Jacob even before Rachel. Okay, one more about this. And this is from Genesis Rabbah. Hold on one second. I love this. All that night, Jacob would cry out to her, Rachel, and she answered him, meaning Leah would answer him, even though he was crying out, Rachel. In the morning, he saw it was Leah. He said to her, what is a cheater, the daughter of a cheater? She said to him, is there ever a teacher, literally a barber? Like if a barber teaches someone to cut hair, the haircuts will not be good, will look like that barber's, right? If a bad barber teaches, their students to cut hair, then, it's like they learn what the barber teaches them. Is there ever a teacher with no students? Did not your father call it Esav? And you answered him, so too, you called out to me the wrong name and I answered you. So this is really measure for measure. So what you did is coming back to you. And if you think about it, Yitzchak did indeed call out Esav, and Yaakov did indeed answer Esav instead of saying Jacob. And Yitzchak was in the dark, as now Jacob is in the dark on so many levels. Okay, much to say. I'm going to stop sharing. There's more material, of course, but I'd like to hear your comments and your thoughts. And I just want to take a step back and really clarify something about at least my understanding of like midah keneged midah and karma. I think this idea can really be misused. If you, either by looking at your own life or especially looking at someone else's life, say, oh, they got cancer because they weren't healthy. Or I know a case of a rabbi dealing with a child that got cancer, and they said, oh, it must be because someone said, must be because the parents got divorced and they had a contentious marriage. And I mean, horrible, ways of, connecting dots that to me are just blasphemous. So I want to say something about where we might apply measure for measure or this idea of karma. So let's say, for instance, someone, is in relationship after relationship and they keep finding someone who doesn't treat them well, or they keep finding someone, or they keep rejecting love. Like where might we sort of find that realm of measure? Like what gets repeated and where does it get repeated? So, there are things that happen to us, as we all know, they could be traumatic or they could be painful, and they kind of imprint us for life and kind of almost brand our consciousness. So we start seeing the world that way. And it's not necessarily that the world is that way, but because of our vision, we think the world is that way, right? So how do we break that karmic loop? Oh, good. I'm getting the thumbs up from the Chemia. I love it. Okay, so I think everyone in this room's laughing. All right, I'm going to open things up. There's a lot more to say about this, but let's go to Jay, Harley, Beth, Richard, Lori. I'm so glad you're here. I haven't seen you in open book for a while. Okay, go ahead. Okay, I'm going to remind people, although it doesn't usually do much good, to be concise, so we can get a lot of voices on the table and so we can do some more text. Okay, go ahead, Jay.
You might have, this might be a Shaila for Rabbi David. With apologies to Nehemiah, I don't think he has a chazaka on this. I'm not sure if it was 3 times in a row, but I have a karmic echo that I want to share about this parsha. So I'd like to do it as a last word, please.
Got it. Wow. We're going to have 2 last words. Okay. Harley.
I'll make this really quickly. So as part of this karma piece is at the end of line 26.
Yeah.
In English is read marry off the younger before the older.
Yeah.
In Hebrew, I sort of whispered when you read older.
Nice.
The children. So there's something.
Oh, wait, the Hebrew, say it again, what?
The Hebrew reads ha-bechira. Now I know you have ben a bechor. However, literally from a Remez point of view, there's this other play that I guess Yaakov may not have any control over. Leah is the chosen one that he just has to deal with, even no matter what he may be thinking, however it may be replayed. But she was clearly chosen, my sense, for him at this moment.
So, okay, one point Harley is making is that she's called the Bechira, and what he stole, or what Esav claims that he stole from him, is the Bechor, right? It's the rights of the firstborn. And that word is specifically used here. So that's also interesting. And the other point that Harley, I think, is making is a point about destiny, that somehow you're saying this word in itself signifies that she is destined for him?
Well, yes, because she's chosen. And it's not just...
she's, not Bechor. Oh, you're saying she's Bachar. She's
yes.
Like chosen, selected,
yes.
different.
Yes, she was, yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I misunderstood that. Okay, thank you. So it's a play on the eldest, which also means, with a different spelling, chosen one. Thank you. Okay, Beth.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I have 3 really quick ones. I find it at the very beginning of the scene where Yaakov's at the watering hole. I always like to imagine that he's talking about all the flocks have been gathered. And I like to imagine that when he says, "My brothers, where are you from?" he's talking to the sheep and they're the ones who respond to him. I'm sure that's not what actually happens, but I like to think of it that way.
Love it.
Another thing is the idea of romance at the wells. We've had romance at the watering hole continuing on to the present day, of people trying to meet other people for romance in bars and all that. That is something that is
for sure
age old. And I guess that was just a common meeting place.
Yeah, contemporary
Yeah.
iterations of water, right? The water,
Yeah.
fountain, the water, the cafe, right, exactly,
Yeah,
beautiful.
and the other thing that jumped out at me, and I don't know how I could have missed this all these years, but I never really absorbed Pasuk 28, that Jacob only waited 1 week for Rachel after marrying Leah.
But then he worked another 7 years after they got married.
Yeah, and
Yes, people
somehow
miss-
that
exactly.
totally blew past me all this time I've been reading this parsha. And I guess that's just me. Maybe everybody knew that, but I didn't know
No,
that.
it's easy to miss that little detail.
So what's very interesting about that, you can understand how he had a child with Leah, but then he's married to Rachel and he keeps having kids with Leah. So it's when the parsha says that Rachel was the loved one and Leah wasn't, well, how unloved was she? She's continuing to have children with her husband.
Great question. Love it. Okay. I think we're Richard and then Lori, Margot, and then I'm going to cut things off and go back to the text.
Just a quick note. There's a certain degree of passivity. You've talked in other learning sessions about having to take a step to do something before something good or at least better happens. There's something going on here too. At the dream before these scenes, he's got his head on a hard place, rock, which could be God, but nonetheless on a hard place. And he's totally passive. He just has this dream of angels going up and down and all that. He doesn't do anything. In a sense, he's taking orders from somebody
He
else.
does something when he wakes up. He makes a
When he
bargain.
wakes up, that's correct. And the same thing is going on here too. In some ways, many ways, he's still continuing in that sort of passive role. And in a sense, he's been trained to do that by his mother. So it takes a long time for him to be able to snap out of it, as it were. And that doesn't really happen until he wrestles with the yeesh.
Interesting.
And there's
Interesting. I don't totally see him as passive here. I mean, he approaches
no, he's not,
Laban.
because he took the stone off the well and all that. He's
Right.
emerging from it, but it really doesn't begin. It's a very gradual process for him to emerge from the sins, problems, issues created for him by his folks. And it takes him a while, and particularly in the realm of love, which he declares, which is an overt step, obviously, but nonetheless messes up by not recognizing who he sleeps with that first night. It takes him a long time to begin to arouse out of that stuff so that he can hug his brother again.
Interesting.
The sort of major step in his life. It doesn't solve all his problems, but that's for another day. But there's a certain sort of gradual emergence from the control of Rebecca that is going on to me in this scene. It's part of a much larger story if you begin, at least for me, if I fit it into that sort of a place.
Interesting. Well, there was one thing I was going to say about that. What was it? I forgot. It'll come back to me. Okay. Lori, great to see you.
Shabbos, everyone. I'm mostly here, Rabbi Dan, but I'm usually behind the scenes, right? But anyway, so something that I just heard this time that I hadn't really like about, Leah's feelings about it, so even though we know that, yes, I'm sure that was a custom to marry the older first. I'm sure that Laban was not particularly an honest man. I'm curious as to whether Leah begged her father, like that Leah was involved here in some way. And that's never really spoken about. And I'm just wondering, because how you talked about her prayers, I'm just wondering, when people are desperate, they might cross the line, right, between honesty and not. And I'm just wondering, either if she or maybe her sister, I'm wondering if the women were in there and they're not as silent as we think we're
going to see a great midrash about that, Lori. Thank you so much. Yeah. What are the women's roles here? Yeah, we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Okay, Margot. And then, as I said before, we're going to go on and take other hands later on.
Good morning, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom,
and Yasher Koach and all of those connections between last week's Parsha and this one. So I have a comment and question. So Yisa Yaakov Raglav, he lifted up his feet. Yisa et Kolo, he lifts up his voice. But the one thing he doesn't lift up is his eyes. He's
Mm.
blind to who is in his bed at night. So that's one thing. And I
Yeah,
had
and he's kind of blind like his father, right?
his father, yeah.
Not knowing the identity of the person, not only before him, but like, under him or on top of him, I don't know, right?
I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. But
Um,
but I wanted to say one thing about that, and I'll let me interrupt you just for a second, Margot, which I was going to say before. We talked about the trauma of the Akedah, and here it is traveling through the generations. Like the trauma of the Akedah got in the way of Yitzchak understanding identity, who's who. If my father could be someone that could kill me, then that kind of disrupts the field of intimacy forevermore. And then, so Isaac doesn't know who's standing before him. And then Jacob doesn't know who he's with. This understanding of like, just who is the person in front of you? And that sort of primal connection being, fundamentally damaged. Okay, go ahead, Marga.
And then my question was, Yashk and Yeshika, they're spelled exactly the same way. It's not just an echo, but it's the same word. And Rachel means you, E-W-E. So there's an interesting, and then had one more connection. So Taratz Rachel, she ran. This is an echo of Rivka, who runs to water the sheep. However, unlike Rivka, she's not asked, what do you want to do? The women are not asked. At least Rivka is asked, do you want to go with this man? And she says, Elech, I want to go. And so even though there's this echo of Taratz, which is also an echo of Avraham, there's a really big difference here. Why shouldn't I give them to you?
Yeah, amazing. Whoa, all right. So we're going to get to the Women's Agency in a minute. I'm going to share my screen, but I want to make one more point before we do that. So this whole thing about Vahine Baboker Vahine Leah, Vahine he Leah. 25. When morning came, there was Leah. Like that shock, right? So it reminds me, there's a psychologist named Harville Hendricks. I don't know if any of you have come across his work. And he talks about how you marry one person with your conscious mind, but what you discover in your marriage or in your partnership, that your unconscious person, mind or being, has chosen an entirely different person. And there you are, stuck with both of them. You got Rachel and you got Leah. And you're like, oh my God, how did this happen, right? So what Harville Hendricks did is devise a whole method for how to work with that. And one of the things he says, what I think is really brilliant, is that, and this is a paraphrase, you choose the person who's least equipped to meet your greatest needs, because that's the place where you're most wounded, right? So you're reenacting, the place of your greatest needs, but it's a place that it's so wounded, you're not really willing to receive in that place. And that's what needs to be worked out. I'm distilling his thought. I think it's actually worth looking at for those of you who are interested. Okay, so let's get to agency and women that Lori brought up and a couple other people brought up. One thing about, here's another version of the Genesis Rabbah Midrash about Leah confronting, talk about, agency and strength on the part of the women, of confronting Jacob for what he did. Hold on, let me just look what I want to read. So, 1 second, sorry. I think I'm getting things. Oh, okay. So she says to him, Leah says to him, he says to her, daughter of a swindler, why did you trick me? And she says to him, what about you? Why did you trick your father? Right? So she throws it right into his face. When he said to you, is this my son Esav? You said to him, I am Esav, your firstborn. Now you are saying, why have you tricked me? And did your father not say, Esav, your brother came with deceit? Okay. So, and this is really interesting. But so because of these things with which she scolded him, he began to hate her. Right. So it explains the hatred. I know that Beth called into a question, but it says she was the hated one, the snu'ah. So, and the Midrash gives this reason, is because Leah opened her mouth and said, like, who do you think you are? You did the same exact thing. Okay. Now, I want to look at this. So the Midrash tells a beautiful story about Rachel and Leah. And I think it's a beautiful story for many reasons. And I call this karmic, not only consequences, but opportunities. So what are the ways in which we break our karmic prisons, right? How can we sort of, operate within those sort of small spaces we've created for ourselves? And here's an example. And this is an example, it's in Echa Rabbah, of Rachel saying to God, God is all mad at the Israelites because of their idolatry and wants to exile them from their land, right? So this is set much later. And Rachel says to God, right, jumped up before God and said, Master of the universe, you know that Yaakov, your servant, loved me a great love and worked for my father for 7 years. And when the 7 years were up and the time came for me to be married to my husband, my father devised a plan to have my sister switch places with me for my husband. And this was very difficult for me. As I heard about the plan, I swallowed my suffering and had mercy on my sister so that she should not be shamed in public. And that evening of my marriage, my sister took my place for my husband instead of me. And I gave her all the signs I gave my husband so that he would think that she was Rachel. And not only that, but I laid under the bed where he laid with my sister. And when he spoke with her, she was silent. And I answered each time so that he would not recognize her voice. And I acted with loving kindness towards her, and I was not jealous of her, and I did not put her to shame. And if I, a creature of flesh and blood, made of dust and ashes, could overcome my jealousy in order to be kind to my sister, why are you, the sovereign of all existence, jealous of the false gods with whom the Israelites dally, false gods who aren't even real? How can you let your jealousy cause your children to be slain and exiled? And the mercy of God was stirred by Rachel's argument. And God said, for your sake, Rachel, I will restore the house of Israel to their place. Have hope, but for the future. The exile, not just physical, but existential and spiritual, will come to an end. Okay. I'm going to take some more. Well, actually, let me do a couple of other things and then I'll take some more comments. Okay, so I'm going to skip this and I will look at Breshit Rabbah, and feel free to look at all the sources. They're all interesting in terms of this story. Breshit Rabbah does something very interesting here. They kind of take the long view on Leah and Rachel. They say Leah was great in her gifts, receiving the priesthood, right? Because she is the son Levi, for all time, and royalty for all time, Judah and David, like from her descends David, and that's the messianic line, the redemptive line. And Rachel, small in her gifts, Joseph bearing sway, but for a time, right? Joseph having power, over his brothers and, sort of in Egypt, but for a short time. And Saul, also for a short time, is Saul king over Israel, and his kingship ends in pretty much in humiliation and failure. And then, this feels like it's built for this, so to speak, this situation. Even ma'asu habonim hayta l'rosh pina. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. So even though Leah is rejected, and she is, the one with unrequited love and desperate for her husband to love her, she even names her children for this, that she's waiting and wants her husband's love, right? So Rachel wants children and has her husband's love, but never says she wants her husband's love, but her children are named for wanting children. So each wants what the other one has. But, Leah is totally undervalued and then becomes so important in terms of who her children are and who, her lineage becomes in history. Okay, I'm going to stop my share and see who wants to talk. Okay, we have Jill who is waiting, Adele, Ilana, and then I know we have Jay and Nehemiah. We may not have more time than that. Okay, Jill. Okay, again, and Jessica. We'll see if we have time for everybody. Kathy Lynn, I see your hand. I'm not sure we have time for everybody. Let's see what we can do. Okay, let me remind people to make their comments short as possible so as many people, we can hear as many voices as possible. Jill.
Okay, great. So, what I see in a lot of the stories in Bereshit is kind of laying out conflicts that are very much true today, kind of, psychodynamic conflicts. But I don't necessarily see a resolution to it. So, especially the idea right here that you're, saying, which is, one is named, I want my husband to love me, who has the children, and the one who doesn't have the children is, I want to have children. And the dynamic between, married folks with children, where like, how do they have enough love for each other and their children, So I just wanted to see if there's any insight about where the Torah may, for lack of better words, kind of give an answer. I mean, I know that it asks a lot of questions and it lays out these conflicts, but I guess I'm kind of wanting a little bit more answers today.
Yeah, Jill, that's like such a huge question, and I can't possibly address it fully now, but I will say a couple of things briefly. One is, everyone wants to know, like, why are our ancestors so dysfunctional? What is going on here? So I think part of it is God has to start somewhere, and this is the material that God has to create this Israelite family, and they're messy. And what happens is, on one level, we see the dysfunction, and another level, we see God's will being implemented through this messiness, right? So, Harley was saying before about destiny, ultimately, we will have an Israelite family. And then they go into slavery, which I think in a way is a spiritual manifestation of where they are psychologically in relationship to one another. Like, the family's such a mess. And so I think part of the answer the Torah gives us is that we need to form a collective to somehow, and receive sacred law to somehow transcend this like limited, narrow infighting between us. And we literally go to the narrow place. But that's all I can say about that right now. It's like it's such a big topic. Okay, so we've got I don't remember my lineup, but I think it's
I just want to say thank you. That was an amazing answer. So thank you so much.
I'm so happy, Joe. I'm so happy. I'm really happy. Okay, Adele, Alana, Jessica.
Good Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbos.
Reb Shlomo shared that Rachel and Rachel and Yaakov had a code, and that Rachel shared it with Leah, which is similar to what
this Midrash, exactly.
Yes, it's similar to the Midrash. And the other thing, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that the maidservants were actually also daughters of Lavan. So I'm wondering how they got, and I'm wondering if it's because of their color, their skin color, that they became maidservants. I'm not sure why, but when I found this out, about 20 years ago, I said, wow, how come I never knew that they were all sisters?
Yeah, I will not comment because I don't know. So I'm going to go to the next person. I'm sorry, Adele. Alana, and I'm going to invite people to make 1 point at this point, not 2.
Boker Tov. So I'm thinking about the ladder as a guiding image here. And back to the beginning quote from Jung about the movement in and out of consciousness and unconsciousness, seeing and not seeing, and that is like this motif that is moving through these stories. And I just had this connection with Leah, that her 12 children are a kind of ladder from despair to the divine, because Judah is connected to the Messiah, and one that she goes up and down, but that is a kind of embodied ladder in her story of moving from her story of not seeing and not seeing. And
Beautiful image. Thank you so much. I love that. Leah's ladder, that can be a midrash that we construct. And I'm wondering where Dina fits into that ladder. Anna, can I go over 5 minutes? Since we started a little late.
Yeah, I'm checking that out too to see what we can do.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Okay, did I say Jessica? I think I said Jessica. We're gonna find out if we can go 5 minutes late, everybody.
Okay, so I'll be very brief. I had written this piece from Rachel's perspective, lying under the bed as she, as she's witnessing the lovemaking between her beloved and her sister. And I just wanted to say that my deepest feeling and my kavanah in writing it, if we had more time, I'd read it, but I won't, had to do with the love between the sisters and kind of the karmic shift of not allowing these women to hate each other. When the word hate is used from Jacob towards Leah, that doesn't continue between them. And there was great love in that.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, good news, everybody. We can go 5 minutes over. Okay, so now I think we have, okay. Kathy Lynn.
Hi.
Hi, Paul, Aluma, and then Jay and Nehemiah. And I don't think we're gonna have time for any others. I'm sorry, Bob. I don't think we're gonna get to you. Yeah.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
So,
shalom.
say, so this is just a quick thing about Jacob. When his mom told him what to do, he just did it without any autonomy. He just did what she wanted. So he took no responsibility at all. So he basically borrowed her authority. He had no authority within. He had no inner kind of construct on what's right, what's wrong, who am I. Then he's persevering, and he's drawn to Rachel. But he doesn't see when he marries Leah because he still has no ability to see because he doesn't see who he is. He doesn't see within himself. But so as he's evolving, finally he has to go meet Esau at the end of the Parsha, right?
And you're echoing what Richard said before. Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, I missed that. But he chooses love. He acted out of love. And when he acts out of love, he also connects with his inner self. He has his autonomy and his authority. And a whole different thing happens. He becomes Israel. But he still vacillates back and forth between Israel and Jacob because he's still up and down, love and fear, cunning, you get it.
As the rest of us are.
For
right?
sure.
Up and down,
Yeah.
love and fear, love and fear. Thank you. That was
Working
beautiful.
on it.
Catherine. Paul, good to see you.
And you. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
The unseen actor here is God. And what the question that is in my mind is, as it usually is, why is a story being told? And the one answer to this that I have in this section is what God is asking the question, what does it mean to my people that I am physically unseen? Are we being deceived? How do they feel about that? What are the various iterations of seen, unseen, and the nature of deception with respect to me? And that's a tough question, and hence the complexity of the story.
So wait, are you saying, let me just make sure I understand, Paul. Are you saying that people are wondering if they're being deceived about God? Is that what you're saying?
I think God is asking that question of itself, or is setting the question up among his or its people. I mean, God is in and out of perception, largely out of physical perception. And this whole story revolves around the nature of being seen and unseen, and deceptions that come about as a consequence of being seen and unseen, which is the nature of our relationship with God.
Yeah. Wow. I think I have to digest that for a while. I'm not going to really respond, but that feels really powerful. Thank you. Okay, Aluma.
Hi.
Hi.
I got on a little bit late. I didn't hear your quote. So I don't know if this is going to connect with your quote, but one thing that you always do is the quotes, kind of how you weave everything together. And I didn't hear the quote, but what I heard immediately was when you were talking about karma and measure for measure.
Yeah.
This song kept running through my head, inch by inch, row by row. I'm going to make my garden grow. And I started thinking about how things are planted within us from the very beginning, from farther on than we can even imagine.
Yeah.
And how am I going to make my garden grow? Well, the things are planted. It depends how you rake and how you hoe. And that connects to Jacob's seen and not seen. And the way that these measures and these seeds can get planted newly is not only through seeing and awareness, but through replanting. And I don't know exactly when that happens or how it happens, but I think it's a lesson for us to look at our seeds and either dissect them, unplant them, and replant them, because otherwise the garden doesn't happen as it should.
Wow. And plant new seeds. Like sometimes I feel I can't unplant what I've planted. It's too much of a mess. Everything's like tangled up and I can't do anything about it. But let me find a little piece of new ground and plant something new and see how that sort of affects the rest of the system.
Yeah, because even in the very beginning, he's already, we don't water the sheep till we're all here. He's already like doing what he always does. Like, there's a sense of togetherness and he's going to separate everything even from that point.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that image. Thank you, Luma. All right, we're up to Nehemiah, and then today Jay is going to be the last person to talk. Bob, can you put your comment in the chat? I'm sorry, I don't think we have time, but if we do, I will call on you, okay?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Nehemiah. Brief, remember, please.
Karma, Vasana, a chain of karma, my experience. All the karmas that I've experienced and everybody experienced is for one purpose, to teach us whatever we need to learn and to come back, as Paul said, inch by inch, as Aluma said, to come back to know, to see God face to face when we come realize. And the example for my karma, my father, who died when I was 3 months, I found a diary. He fell in love with my mother, like Rachel, with my mother, which was beautiful, but a platonic love to a sister. And I've gone to work out the same karma in my relationships. Same kind of karma to solve his problem through my life. And he's very happy that I'm working on it.
Wow. Thank you, Nehemiah. Jay.
Thank you to Aluma for mentioning a song, which is a great segue to my meta comment. And I ask forgiveness in advance if it seems like it's going from the sacred and profane, but I cannot let today go by without pointing out that in November of 1971, exactly 50 years ago today, and it's no accident, Led Zeppelin came out with its maybe most amazing classic song, which is clearly a drash on this Parsha.
I'm sorry, but what's the song?
Stairway to Heaven.
Heaven, of course. Stairway to Heaven. But that's the piece we didn't look at today.
I know, but Ilana actually referred to it as well, so I have a gushpanka from that.
What was the song? What was the song?
Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven.
A great song.
Jay, do you want to sing a bar?
I can maybe hum it. Da, 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 da. Well, no, I'll ruin it. So if someone else wants to sing a bar, please. I know we have some talented singers here.
Amazing. Okay. All right, Bob, quick. Bob.
I just wanted to say how these stories have carried through for thousands of years, because my mother's youngest sister had to elope because her mother wouldn't allow her to marry before her 2 older sisters. And I must have heard this story 1,000 times. And even 2 weeks ago, I heard it again at a family event. And the trauma just of no one coming to my aunt's wedding carries forth, so that the story just keeps echoing and echoing and echoing.
Wow. 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 And, you know, and to pick up a little bit, thank you. That was a great piece of like, you know, yeah, this happens in real life, but these kinds of things happen in real life, and deceptions for sure happen in real life. And I want to go back to this idea of karma and just invite us to use and midah keneged midah, measure for measure, invite us to use it well, right? Invite us not to use it for judging other people or even ourselves, but asking ourselves what in our lives echoes from the past. And I think, you know, Rambam, Maimonides has this idea that the last stage of tshuva, you know, it's full tshuva when when you're in the same exact position and you don't do what you did last time. And I think for me that intersects with Freud's repetition compulsion. Like we do the same thing again and again, but then we finally realize it's not ultimately like my consciousness that I project on the world and need to understand the world via my consciousness, but the world is the world, even, God, I don't know if this is clear, even without all my projections. We're getting to know the world and maybe God's self without our projections feels like it's on the way to tshuva, like stripping it in a sense of karma and all our repetitions and all our projections. Like that to me seems like a worthy goal, like coming to know you and you coming to know me, or knowing the people who I'm closest with in my most intimate sphere without all those painful projections. Wow. Okay. Wish we could go on studying all day long, but it's time for Shabbat services. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat